The Miami Dolphins are once again staring at an offseason that will test their ability to make the tough calls. Another year, another key player whose future is up in the air, another moment where the team has to decide between paying up or watching a homegrown talent walk away. It's the reality of the modern NFL, where the salary cap forces front offices to prioritize, and sometimes that means losing players you don't want to lose. This time, the decision revolves around Jevon Holland. The safety has been one of the most impactful defenders on Miami's roster since being drafted in the second round in 2021. He's not just good, he's special. He sees the game differently, plays with an instinct that can't be taught, and when he's on the field, the defense looks different. The problem? He's set to hit free agency, and Miami has to decide whether to keep him at a high cost or let him go and use that money elsewhere. The window for applying the franchise tag opened last week and runs until March 4th. If the Dolphins want to ensure Holland stays for at least one more season, this is their chance. But tagging him comes at a steep price. $19.6 million for the year, fully guaranteed, a number that can't be restructured or spread out. That's a big commitment for a team that, as of now, doesn't have the cap space to make it happen without some serious financial maneuvering. This is a familiar situation. Last offseason, Christian Wilkins and Robert Hunt were in similar spots. Two homegrown players, two guys the team clearly valued, two guys who ended up leaving because Miami simply couldn't, or wouldn't, match the contracts they received on the open market. The Dolphins could have used the tag to keep one of them, but they didn't. Now, they faced the same choice with Holland. So what do? The case for keeping him is obvious. This defense already has holes to fill, and losing Holland would create another massive one. The secondary is already in flux. Xavier Howard is gone, Kendall Fuller was cut, and while Jalen Ramsey is still elite, he can't cover the entire field by himself. Miami is already looking for a starting cornerback, and if they let Holland walk, they're also looking for a starting safety. That's a dangerous game to play when you're trying to compete in the AFC, where elite quarterbacks are everywhere. Holland isn't just another player in the secondary. He's a leader, a playmaker, the kind of guy who makes everyone around him better. He can play deep. He can come up and support the run. He can blitz. He can cover tight ends and slot receivers. Players like that don't grow on trees. If he hits the open market, he's going to have plenty of suitors, and Miami would have to replace him with someone who, almost by default, would be a downgrade. And let's not forget how important the defense was last year. There were stretches where the offense struggled, where injuries piled up, where Miami's high-powered attack wasn't firing on all cylinders. It was the defense that kept them in games, that made the big stops when they needed them most. Holland was a huge part of that. Losing him wouldn't just weaken the secondary. It would put even more pressure on an offense that already has plenty of questions to answer. But keeping him isn't as simple as just saying he's a good player. The money has to come from somewhere. Right now, the Dolphins are already over the cap. If they tag Holland, that's nearly $20 million that gets locked in immediately. That means they have to make cuts, restructure contracts, find ways to create space. And that brings us to the bigger issue. Miami has other needs. The offensive line is still a problem. The end of last season made that painfully clear. Injuries exposed a lack of depth, and by the time Miami got to the playoffs, the protection was falling apart. If this team wants to truly compete, fixing that unit has to be a top priority. That takes money. Money that, if spent on Holland, won't be available to sign linemen who can protect Tua Tagovailoa. And it's not just the offensive line. The Dolphins need another starting safety, even if they keep Holland. They need another corner. They need depth at wide receiver. They need another tight end. They need a veteran backup quarterback. That's a long list. And the reality is, Miami doesn't have unlimited resources. The salary cap forces teams to make tough choices, and when you're looking at the entire roster, spending $19.6 million on one safety might not be the best move, especially when the team let Christian Wilkins and Robert Hunt walk last year for similar financial reasons. Chris Grier has a history of avoiding the franchise tag. He had the opportunity to use it last year, and he passed. He has the opportunity again this year, and there's a good chance he passes again. Not because Holland isn't worth keeping, but because the numbers just don't add up.